On the super review, let's take a look at the i10 TWS. So I just got done reviewing the Apple AirPods, which are $160 Bluetooth headphones, and I quite like them. I gave them 5 stars out of 5, but they're $160. And now here we've got a version of the AirPods, and these are very much a clone of the AirPods that cost well under 160 bucks. In fact, I've seen these anywhere from around $60, $50, as low as 30 something dollars if you're okay with buying these on AliExpress. Are these gonna sound like $30 AirPods? Are these gonna sound like the real deal? I don't know. Let's go ahead and open it up. We'll find out what you get inside the box. Then I'll give it a listening test, and I'll compare these directly to the AirPods, as well as compared to some other around $30 to $50 true wireless buds, because I don't know, there's a good chance this could be the one to buy. Let's check it out. All right, right off the bat, this box does not spin nearly as well as the box on the Apple AirPods, the genuine Apple AirPods. So, in the battle of i10 versus AirPods, so far AirPods are up by 1. Let's do a quick tour of the box, find out what we can about this, and just for comparison, here is the actual Apple AirPods. You can see they're doing a pretty good job of ripping them off. They do clearly label them the i10 TWS. So, okay, they're honest there. The Apple has a little bit of a raised edge to it. There's definitely no raised edge here, and generally the quality of the photography definitely favors the Apple. But you don't actually care about that. You want to know, how do these things function? So around here in the back, we've just got a picture of the device, and it's got a USB-C cable. It looks like a USB-C cable plugging into the bottom of it, so that's nice. But yeah, there is actually no other text on this thing, so let's just go ahead and crack it open and find out what we got. All right, so we got the i10 TWS completely unboxed, and what you get inside here is exactly what you get inside the Apple AirPods. You do get a cable, okay, and it's slightly different here actually because you get a USB-C charging cable, and that's actually kind of a nice touch, frankly. And you do get a little set of instructions, which hopefully I don't have to use, but these things might be a little bit more complicated to use than the AirPods. We'll find that out. And then you get the device itself, which comes in this charging case, which that's a very familiar design. These things look visually, apart from the fact that there are LEDs in the front, these things look exactly like the AirPods. Okay, it's also got a USB-C charging port down there, which is slightly different, but not much different. These pods right here, again, look very, very similar to AirPods. Without having them side by side here to compare, I'm not seeing any differences. So let me go ahead and pull in the AirPods. All right, so these are genuine AirPods. These are the i10 TWS. And right off the bat, the AirPods have a little bit more weight to them, that's for sure. And I would say that the action on the lid, a little bit more satisfying with the AirPods. So head to head, frankly, there's a good chance I'm gonna get these things mixed up because these things are surprisingly identical. That said, similar physical, that's one thing. What's really gonna be important is how do these things function? How do they sound? So without further ado, I'm gonna go ahead and take these away, hook them up to my phone, spend some time with them, and I'll come back and I'll give them a review, let you know how do these things compare to the AirPods, but also how do these things compare to some other, $30, $50 true wireless buds. All right, so after a week of living with the i10 TWS and comparing them directly with Apple's AirPods, am I ready to say that these things are just as good as AirPods for a third of the price? In short, no, But these things actually get surprisingly close. Let's start with the build, which is almost identical to the Apple AirPods in more than one ways, all right? The overall footprint of the device, the outer size and the volume of this thing is identical to the Apple AirPods. The earbuds are identical to the Apple AirPods, and you know how I know that they're identical? I was able to take the pods from here, drop them into the case of the AirPods, and take the AirPods and drop them into the case of this. In fact, this case was indicating that it was trying to charge the AirPods, which is probably a bad idea, but I did it for science, I did it for you. But that just goes to show like how close of a facsimile these things are to original AirPods in terms of dimensions. Apart from size, the case has also got the same nice, satisfying magnetic lid. It's not quite as nice as the lid on the AirPods, but frankly, if you never use the AirPods, you wouldn't know the difference. The plastic is maybe a slightly different color. It's not quite as pure white, especially on the case itself. It seems like the buds are basically pure white, but the case itself has got almost a yellow tint, kind of depending on the light. In some light, it just looks white, but here I'm looking at it right now, and you probably can't see it, but for me right now, the case definitely looks like a different color of white than the AirPods or the pods themselves. Not a big deal, but that is something to consider. Now, in terms of functionality, again, these things are surprisingly close to AirPods, not quite as good. They come short in a couple of ways, but surprisingly close. So just like in terms of general Bluetooth connection, just like the AirPods, these things will automatically power themselves on when you take them out of the case, automatically connect to your phone, and you're not pressing any buttons, you're not pairing anything, you're not even having to turn these things on. They do it by themselves, and they do it pretty reliably. There were a couple of hiccups that I got in the connection. One example, just one time when I was out walking with these, the audio became desynced between AirPods, and that happened one time. There were a couple other times where there were just like small minor hiccups in the audio, but mostly these things were pretty reliable. So not as reliable as the AirPods, not even as reliable as something like the Dudio's Zeus Airs, which are about the same price. But these come in this form factor that frankly is, when I reviewed the AirPods, I love this form factor. Here we've got it for a much cheaper price, and the functionality not quite as good as other items in this price range, but you get this form factor. What's that worth to you? I'll let you decide. Other things worth calling out about functionality is that, like AirPods, you can use them one at a time if you want. The only downside or the only limitation here is that you can only use the left one at a time. You can't use the right one by itself if you wanted to. Not a big deal for me at all, but just something you should probably keep in mind. The Bluetooth range on these is actually excellent, better than AirPods. I was able to leave my phone here in this room in the studio, and I was able to walk around the house, and I didn't get a single connection drop, even with multiple walls in between me. So really pretty impressive stuff. Like the AirPods, there's no buttons on the earbuds themselves. They do have tap functionality to activate certain controls. There's actually more functions supported by these than there are with the AirPods, right? With the AirPods, you get one double tap input per ear, and you can customize it. It's pretty cool, but you don't get access to a lot. These actually give you a lot more options. So with a single tap, you can toggle pause and play. A double tap does something else. A triple tap does another thing, and then pressing and holding on it, I think, activates Siri. So you basically have access to 4 actions, which is, a step up from the 2 that you get on AirPods. Unfortunately, like AirPods, you can't control volume. And then one actually big problem I had with these is that because play pause is activated by a single tap, it was actually really easy for me to accidentally pause or start playing music. In fact, it one time resulted in a pretty embarrassing rap lyric being blasted out of my phone at full volume in the middle of the office. That did happen once. It did happen once, but it only happened that once. But yeah, that's one downside to having tap controls, especially a tap control that's as easy to activate as a single press. Let's see, one other feature that these things have over the AirPods is they actually support wireless charging. This case, you just drop this thing onto a Qi charger and it starts charging. I tested it, seemed to work. That was pretty impressive, especially for this price range, and considering that Apple still hasn't done that. But that does bring up a couple of points about the battery that are worth calling out. One, so there are lights on the front of this thing, and let's see if I can turn them on. while these things are charging, that completely failed. While these things are charging, the lights will turn on. And it's nice that they indicate that it's charging, but it also means that there's gonna be a glowing green light on this the entire time they're charging, which I think is a little bit of a downside. But for me, the bigger problem with these is that the battery life on the buds is not very good. I was getting like an hour to an hour and a half of battery life before the low battery warning came on and these things powered themselves off. So compared to the AirPods, they've got like 5 hours of battery on the buds. Typical true wireless buds are getting around like 3, maybe 4 hours. So these are like maybe half of what you would get with something like the Dudios Air. Sound quality on the i10 is actually not very bad at all. When I reviewed the i7 TWS, it was another AirPods knockoff. The sound on that was just not good. These are surprisingly pretty decent. Now, they're not quite as nice sounding as the AirPods. I think the AirPods have got like maybe a better sense of stage, a lot more clarity. But these are actually, they're pretty good. The highs are maybe a little bit harsh. There's not a lot of bass because this is an open earbud. It's not creating a seal, which is usually what's going to generate a lot of bass. So there's a decent amount of bass, but there's not a lot of bass. Don't come in here expecting bass, but frankly, these are a pretty good listen. And frankly, I think really pretty solid for something like podcasts or audio, like audiobooks or stuff like that, watching YouTube videos. So to score the i10 TWS, I would give these things a pretty solid 3 stars out of 5. Look, there's some issues with the connection. The battery is just not, it's just not very good. But for what they are, for something that comes in this small of a package, they're pretty good. And frankly, I think I'm gonna find myself ended up using these things a lot just because of how convenient this package is. I mentioned it when I was reviewing the AirPods that I think this form factor is just excellent. I also really like the open air sound rather than sealing my ears. I know a lot of people out there disagree, and it depends on kind of what I'm into. But for most of what I'm using these for, which is YouTube videos and podcasts, and I'm walking around the world, I don't want to seal out the world, and I like this open air sound. There's not a lot of options in this price range, and especially not with this form factor. So I'm forgiving of some of those issues that I experienced. Versus something that's closer in its price range, I think the Dudios Air are my favorites at this point. And the Dudios Air, I think they've got a little bit better sound quality, and the connection was 100% reliable for all of my experience with them. So if you want something that's not gonna be annoying at all, the Zeus Airs are gonna be a really good choice. If you want something that's a little bit more open air and a really small form factor, this is a pretty good option as well, but it's gonna be really up to you. If you're interested in checking these things out, first of all, a couple things worth calling out. There are a bunch of different AirPod clones, first of all. There are the i7s, the i9s, these are the i10s. The i7s I would stay away from. I reviewed them before, I gave them 2 stars out of 5. Frankly, I should probably have given them 1 stars out of 5, 1 stars, just 1 star. They're just kind of a mess. You can get them really cheap, but I don't think they're worth it. The i9s I don't have any experience with, but the i10 is the one that a lot of people were telling me is actually really good. So this is the one that I took a chance on, and it turns out it's pretty good. To identify the differences with them, the i9 and the i7 I think sometimes come in cases that don't look quite exactly like AirPods. They look very similar, but they don't have the full rounded corners, and they're not as small as this. The other good tell is these 4 lights down the center, which seems to be unique to the i10. Another thing worth calling out is the price on these things varies pretty wildly depending on where you find them. If you get these things on AliExpress, if you don't mind ordering overseas, it's gonna take a while to get to you, but you can get these for around like 35 bucks, which I think is kind of a killer deal. Now, if you're buying them on Amazon or something, or some other, US centered retail shops, they're gonna cost closer to around 60 bucks. And at that price range, it's a little tough for me, but I think at 60 bucks, it's still a decent buy. Again, I think it's a 3 star out of 5 product. So at 60 bucks, it's not bad. But if you can get it on Ali, 35 bucks, I think that's pretty killer. If you're interested in checking these out, of course, I've got links in the description down below. While you're down there, you can hit the like button for the video if you liked it. You can subscribe to the channel, and then I'll see you in the next super review.